You watched a girl walk away from a balcony at 16 with her head high and her heart in pieces. You sat inside her head for an hour and finally understood what that walk cost her. You sat inside his guilt for an hour and finally understood what 30 seconds on a balcony can do to 3 lives. You have the complete story now. Every piece, every truth, every chapter that was hidden and then found, and then finally given to the people it belonged to. This is the last video, the one where the truth that has been sitting between them for 11 years finally lands in the center of the room where all 3 of them can see it. The one where 2 people who loved each other at 16 and spent 10 years becoming ready choose, stay until the very end. Because the last scene of this video is the one this entire series was always building toward, and it is worth every single second. This is where it ends. Not with a bang, not with a dramatic declaration in the rain or a sprint through an airport or any of the performed versions of love that get mistaken for the real thing. It ends the way real things end, quietly, completely, in a Sunday morning kitchen with coffee and a book in a hand, finding another hand on a table without either person deciding to reach. But before we get there, we have to go through everything that comes before it. The conversation that should have happened 10 years ago. The truth that 3 people have been circling for a decade, finally landing in the center of the room where all of them can see it. The moment 2 people who loved each other at 16 finally stand in front of each other at 27 and 28 with nothing between them. No partial truths, no missing pieces, no carefully maintained distance. And choose. You have heard the prequel. You have been inside Zara's head. You have sat with Daniel's guilt. You know every piece of this story now. This is the last piece. And it is the one that makes all the others worth it. If you have not watched the prequel, Zara's POV and Daniel's POV yet, go and watch those first. The links are in the description. This video will break you in the best way if you have the full context and in an entirely different way if you do not. Subscribe right now and drop a comment telling me, are you ready for this? Because we are going in. 3 days after Daniel's confession, Zara was still carrying it. Not heavily. She had moved things before, had developed over 10 years the specific internal skill of holding difficult information without letting it flatten her. But this particular thing had a texture she had not encountered before. Not painful exactly. More like the feeling of a room you have been navigating in the dark for a very long time, and someone has finally turned on the light, and you are standing in the middle of the full picture for the first time. And the first thing you feel is not relief, but the specific vertigo of seeing the complete shape of a space you thought you already understood. She knew now. Everything. The bet. The forfeit, the 30 seconds in the doorway, the piece that had been missing from her story since she was 16 years old. She had the complete version, and the complete version was sitting in her, and rearranging things she had built around the incomplete one, with a thoroughness that required time rather than management. She went to work. She sat across from Seo-jun in the conference room every day, and reviewed operational frameworks and revenue models and staffing structures with the focused competence that had never once failed her in professional contexts. She was excellent at it. She had always been excellent at it. And she was aware, with the particular self-awareness of someone who had spent 10 years examining their own interior architecture, that the excellence was partly genuine and partly the thing she did when something too significant to process in a day required somewhere else to put itself temporarily. Seo-jun noticed the difference in her. He noticed everything about her. He always had. That had been true at 16 in a school courtyard and was true now in a 30-floor corporate building in Seoul. The quality of his attention unchanged by a decade of practice at managing it. She was different, not colder, warmer, actually, in the specific disorienting way of someone who has stopped spending energy on a defense they have decided to retire. The composed, professional distance she had maintained since day one had a looseness to it now. Small things. The way she sometimes paused before answering him, not calculating her response, but simply being present in the question. The way she occasionally let silences sit between them without immediately filling them with the next professional item. The way she looked at him sometimes, quickly before her editing mechanism caught it, with something he recognized because he had seen it from the other side for 30 years. He said nothing. He showed up. He was patient in the way of someone who has learned that patience is not passivity, but the most active form of respect, giving someone the full unconditional space of their own timeline, without making the space about you. He had been learning this for 10 years. He was good at it now. On Wednesday morning, Daniel Kwan walked into the KSJ Technologies building at 9:15 and asked to see Seo-jun. His assistant came to find him in the conference room where he and Zara were mid-session, leaning over a projected financial model, close enough that he could smell the specific coffee she always brought from outside and had never once accepted from the office kitchen. He straightened, caught Zara's eye. She was already looking at him with an expression he could not read, something careful and significant and knowing. "Tell him I'll be there in 10 minutes, Seo-jun said. His assistant left. He looked at Zara. She looked back at him. "Go," she said quietly. Something in the way she said it. Not a professional dismissal, something more deliberate, the tone of someone who knows what is about to happen in the room he is walking toward, made him pause. "Zara, go," she said again. Her eyes held his. It needs to happen. He held her gaze for a moment longer than professional courtesy required. Then he nodded and walked out. She watched him go. Then she turned back to the financial model on the screen and looked at the numbers without seeing them and pressed her hand flat against the conference table and breathed. Seo-jun closed his office door. Daniel was standing at the window when he came in, not with the staged composure of someone who had arranged themselves into a position, but the restless standing of someone who could not sit with what they were carrying. He turned when he heard the door. They looked at each other across the office. 10 years of professional civility and careful managed distance and everything underneath it that neither of them had been to the inside of since they were 17 years old in school blazers. "Sit down," Seo-jun said. Daniel sat. Seo-jun sat across from him. Not at his desk. Not the version of this conversation that happened behind glass and professional furniture, in the 2 chairs near the window. The city behind them both. Equal ground. "Tell me," Seo-jun said. Daniel looked at his hands, then at Seo-jun. Then he began. He told it in order. He had learned from telling Zara that the only way to tell this was in the sequence it actually happened, beginning with October, with seeing her arrive, with 3 weeks of quiet, careful attention before the dare existed. He watched Seo-jun's expression as he talked, and Seo-jun's expression did the specific thing of someone who is listening with their full body, not just their ears. Very still, fully present, absorbing each piece before the next one arrived. He told him about the lunch table, about what it felt like to hear the dare made about the girl he had been building toward for 3 weeks, about watching all semester, about the Saturday afternoon in the common room. Seo-jun's expression changed completely when Daniel said the word forfeit. Not explosively. The change was seismic in the contained, precise way of something structural, a single shift that reorganized everything around it without making a sound. His eyes. Something moved through his eyes that Daniel recognized as the specific pain of understanding arriving all at once. Not the gradual accumulation of pieces, but the sudden, complete picture landing in one moment. "You were there," Seo-jun said. Not a question. "Yes. That Saturday, you heard." "Yes." Seo-jun was quiet for a long time. He looked at the city through the window. His hands rested on his knees with a stillness that cost him something to maintain. The office was very quiet. 30 floors below, Seoul went about its business with complete indifference to what was happening above it. "The balcony," Seo-jun said finally. His voice was even, careful. the voice of someone keeping themselves in the room through the specific force of a decision to stay present. You knew when you walked to those doors. Yes. You knew I had already ended it. Yes. And you told her about the bet, and you left out the forfeit. The word yes felt inadequate for what it needed to carry. Daniel said it anyway because it was true, and the only thing left was the true thing said plainly. Yes? Seo-jun turned back from the window. He looked at Daniel for a long moment with eyes that were not angry. Past anger, already through it, somewhere deeper and more complicated. The look of someone who is doing the honest accounting of a decade and finding the numbers coming out differently than he had been calculating them. I spent 10 years thinking I deserved what happened, Seo-jun said quietly. That I had started something I had no business starting, and the consequence was fair. That she left because of what I did. He paused. She left because of what you left out. Yes, Daniel said. I know. She would have stayed. It was not a question, not a recrimination. Just a man arriving at the true version of his own story for the first time and saying it out loud to confirm it was real. If you had told her the complete thing, if she had known I had already chosen her over the game before the game could hurt her, she would have stayed. Daniel said nothing. The answer was in the silence, and both of them knew it. Why are you telling me now? Seo-jun said. Because I already told her. He held Seo-jun's gaze. And you deserve to hear it from me. Not from her, not secondhand, from me. Directly, with nothing left out this time. The silence that followed was the longest silence Daniel had ever sat in. Longer than the silence after the formal. Longer than the silence of 10 years of avoiding this room. It had a quality to it. Not empty, full, dense with everything that had been unsaid between two people who had been friends at 17 and had been managing the ghost of that friendship ever since. Then Seo-jun said, I need you to leave. Daniel nodded. He stood, moved to the door. Daniel. He turned. Seo-jun was looking at him with an expression that was complicated and honest and completely unperformed. I am not going to tell you it is fine, he said. It is not fine, what you did on that balcony and the 10 years after it. It is not fine, and I am not going to tell you it is. Daniel held this. He did not flinch from it. I know, but I am going to tell you that you are here, that you told the truth to both of us, that it cost you something and you did it anyway. He paused. That means something, even if it took 10 years. Daniel stood in the doorway for a moment, felt the full weight of those words land in the place that had been waiting for them since he was 17 years old in a formal suit, lying awake in the dark. Thank you, he said. He walked out. Seo-jun sat in his office alone. He did not move for a long time. He sat in the chair by the window with the city behind him and let the full picture arrive, without trying to organize it into something more manageable. The complete story. The one where he had been a 17-year-old boy who had made a terrible start and then made the right choice and then lost everything anyway. Not because of the start, but because of what someone else had done with a piece of information in 30 seconds on a balcony. He had spent 10 years carrying a guilt that was real. The bet had been real, the start had been wrong, his culpability for that was genuine. But he had also been carrying a version of events that was missing the most important chapter. The chapter where he chose her. The chapter that Daniel had kept for 10 years like a debt he wasn't ready to pay. He had paid it now. It did not undo the decade. It did not give back the mornings he had woken up in the specific quiet of someone who has lost something they loved and has accepted it as the fair price of what they did. It did not simplify anything, but it changed the weight of it. Not lighter, different. The weight of someone who had done something wrong at the beginning and then done something right, and then had that right thing taken from him by someone else's jealousy. That was a different story to carry than the one he had been carrying. A truer one. He picked up his phone, looked at Zara's name in his contacts. Put it down. Not tonight. Tonight belonged to sitting with the full version of his own story. Tomorrow, he would walk into that conference room and she would already be there, and the complete truth would finally be between them, and they would have a conversation that had been waiting for 10 years. Tonight he sat with the city and let himself grieve the version of the story that had never existed. The one where Daniel had said the complete thing on that balcony and she had stayed, and they had been 17 and certain and together. And then, quietly and without ceremony, he let it go. Because the story that had actually happened had brought them both here. To this city, this building, this specific intersection of two people who had spent 10 years becoming the versions of themselves that could finally do this right. And there was something in that. Not comfort exactly. Not the easy consolation of everything happens for a reason. But something more honest. The recognition that the people they had become were built from the years between. That the Zara who had walked into his conference room and dismantled his company's infrastructure with composed surgical brilliance was built from 10 years of London and Johannesburg and Auntie Abina's kitchen table and Kofi and every other thing that had happened in the space between them. And that the man he had become, the man who had needed to prove he could be someone worthy of being, was built from the same decade. They had not lost 10 years. They had spent them. He sat with this until the city outside went dark, and the office around him went dark, and the only light was the glow of Seoul through the floor-to-ceiling windows, indifferent and relentless and beautiful. Then he went home. Zara called Amara at 10 that night. She was sitting on the floor of her Seoul apartment. Not the sofa, the floor, with her back against the sofa and her knees pulled up, and the city outside doing its usual, unhurried nighttime version of itself. The floor felt right. Something about the deliberateness of it. Something about choosing to be low and grounded for a conversation that required all of her actual self, rather than the managed version. Amara answered on the first ring. "I've been waiting," she said. Exactly the way she always said it. Like the waiting was a given. Like Zara's call was always just a matter of when. "Daniel told him today," Zara said. Silence for a moment. Then, "How did that go?" "I don't know completely. Seo-jun hasn't said anything to me yet." She paused. "He will tomorrow." "And what are you going to say?" Zara looked at the city through her window. The lights. The specific quality of Seoul at night that she had been learning over these weeks. Not indifferent. Just vast. Just bigger than any single thing happening inside it. "I have been thinking about that." "Zara." Amara's voice was warm and direct, and exactly what it had always been. The specific warmth of someone who had known her since she was 16 and had never once pretended not to see her clearly. "Stop thinking about it. Tell me what you actually want." The question landed in the apartment with the weight of the same question Auntie Abena had asked her at 17 in a London kitchen, and she had spent 10 years thinking about. What do you want? Not what is smart, not what is safe, not what makes sense given the history and the context and the careful architecture of a life built around never being caught off guard by love again. What do you actually want? She pressed her back against the sofa, felt the floor solid beneath her. Let the question be real for once without immediately putting a framework around it. "I want him," she said. The words arrived before she could edit them, and she felt the full exposure of them in the air of the apartment. 3 words, simple and complete, and without any of the professional language she had been using to keep this at a manageable distance for weeks. "I have wanted him since I was 16 years old," she continued. And the saying of it had a quality she had not expected. Not relief exactly, but the specific release of something that has been held very tightly for a very long time, and has finally been allowed to unclench. "I built 10 years of reasons not to say so, and I am exhausted by the reasons, and I am done with the reasons, and I want him." The silence from Amara's end lasted approximately 3 seconds. Then Amara made a sound that was not quite a word and not quite a scream, but lived in the territory between them. The specific noise of someone whose patience across a decade has just been vindicated completely. "Finally," Amara said. Finally, Zara Mensa. Finally. Zara laughed. Really laughed. The unguarded version. The one that arrived before the editing mechanism caught it, and that she had learned over these Seoul weeks to stop catching. "Don't say I told you so," she said. "I am absolutely going to say I told you so," Amara said. "I have been waiting to say it for approximately 9 years, and I have earned it." A pause. "Now, what are you going to do about it?" Zara looked at the city. "Tomorrow," she said. "I'm going to do something about it tomorrow." She did not sleep well that night. Not the anxious sleeplessness of someone managing something they are afraid of. She had done enough of that in her life to know the difference. This was the awake, present, slightly electric sleeplessness of someone who has made a decision and is living in the hours between the decision and the doing of it. The good kind of awake. The kind that has nothing to do with fear and everything to do with the specific aliveness of someone who has stopped running from something and turned around to face it. She lay in the dark and thought about tomorrow with the particular quality of attention she usually reserved for things that mattered. Not planning exactly. More like arriving. Like the internal equivalent of walking slowly towards something you have been circling for a very long time and finally letting your feet find the direct path. She thought about 16. About the tree in the afternoon light in the way he had said, "I don't know yet," like it was the most honest thing he had ever said, and she had filed it under real without understanding that she was doing it. She thought about 30 years old and Johannesburg and 2 in the morning, and the question she had finally let herself ask. She thought about the moment she had opened that file on her laptop and seen his name and felt her heart do something she had stopped trying to manage. She thought about what Amara had said. Finally, Zara Mensa. Finally. At some point, the city outside her window shifted from its nighttime frequency to its early morning one. That specific hour when Seoul stopped pretending to sleep and started becoming itself again. And she got up, made coffee, stood at the window with the mug in both hands the way Auntie Abena always held hers and looked at the city until the light changed properly. Then she got dressed, picked up her portfolio, and went to do something about it. He was already there. She came through the conference room doors at 8:40 and found him sitting not at his usual position at the head of the table, but in one of the chairs along the side, close to where she usually sat, laptop closed in front of him, jacket off, the deliberate casual posture of someone who had decided not to be behind anything this morning. Not a desk, not a table length of distance, just a chair and whatever happened next. He looked up when she came in. She stopped in the doorway for a moment, took him in, fully, without the professional rationing she had been applying to every look she gave him since the first day. The specific way he looked in the early morning before the building filled around him. The particular quality of his stillness that she had first noticed at 16 and had never stopped noticing since. She walked in, set her portfolio on the table, did not go to her usual seat at the opposite end. She sat beside him. The proximity was immediate and significant, and neither of them pretended it was not. Close enough that she could feel the warmth of him beside her. Close enough that the careful professional distance that had characterized every interaction in this room since day one was no longer operating. He turned toward her. She turned toward him. "Daniel told me," he said. His voice was even and direct, and gave her the full weight of the words without performing any particular emotion around them. "I know," she said. "I was going to tell you myself. I needed a few more days to understand what to do with it first." He looked at her. "What did you do with it?" She thought about the floor of her apartment at 10 last night and Amara's voice, and 3 words that had arrived before she could manage them. "I stopped pretending I didn't already know what I wanted to do with it," she said. Something moved through his expression. Not surprise exactly. Something deeper than surprise. The look of someone receiving confirmation of something they had been hoping for without allowing themselves to rely on the hope. He did not say anything immediately. He held her gaze with the full, unmanaged version of himself. No professional rationing, no carefully calibrated composure, and waited. She appreciated this about him. had always appreciated it. The specific quality of someone who understood that some moments required presence rather than words, and had the particular courage to offer presence without filling it. "I need to ask you something," she said. "Anything. When you came to the tree the first day, before it was a dare, before any of it." She held his gaze steadily. "What were you actually feeling?" The question landed between them with the full weight of everything that had never been said in all the years, and all the working sessions, and all the carefully managed proximity. He looked at her and she watched him make the decision. Not to give her the easy version, not the performed version, the real one. And felt something in her chest respond to that decision before he had even opened his mouth. "I was terrified," he said. Not the admission of someone confessing a weakness, but the statement of someone naming a fact they have finally decided deserves to be named. Not of you. Of what it meant that I noticed you the way I noticed you. I had never felt that specific quality of, he paused, finding the right word, recognition. Like something in me knew something about you before I had any of the information to know it with. She was very still. "The dare gave me a reason to cross the courtyard that felt safer than the real reason," he said, "and I took it. That is the part I have to live with. That the real reason existed before Jinwoo said anything, and I used the dare as cover for it, instead of just walking to that tree because I wanted to." "What was the real reason?" she said. He looked at her with the eyes that had been seeing her since October of the year they were both 16, and said, simply and completely, "I wanted to sit with you. That was all. I just wanted to be in whatever space you were in because you made every space feel like somewhere worth being." The conference room was very quiet. Outside the building, Seoul was waking up properly. The frequency of it building from early morning to full daytime with the relentless energy of a city that never really needed to build from anything because it was always already running. In here, it was just the two of them, and the full, honest weight of something that had been waiting 11 years for this exact room, and this exact morning. "I close my book early sometimes," she said, "when I knew you were coming." He went completely still. "I noticed you noticing me before you crossed the courtyard the first time," she said. "I had been noticing you for 2 weeks. You were in my economics class, and you explained a concept through a traffic pattern analogy one afternoon, and something in me filed you under a category I was not looking at directly." She paused. "I was not as unbothered as I looked. I was never as unbothered as I looked." The words landed, and she felt the exposure of them. The specific vulnerability of saying a true thing you have been holding for 11 years to the exact person it belongs to. And she did not step back from it. She held it. Let it be real in the air between them. He said her name. Just her name. The way it sounded in his voice when he was not managing it. Not the professional version, not the careful version. The one that had been there since he was 16 and had never fully gone anywhere in the 10 years since. She looked at him. "I have spent 10 years trying to figure out how to become someone worthy of asking you for a chance," he said. "Not performing worthiness, actually becoming it. Understanding what I did at the beginning and what it cost and who paid the price for it, and building myself from that understanding rather than from the version that was easier to live with." He paused. "I am not going to ask you to forgive 17-year-old me. I am not going to ask you to give back the 10 years. Those things are not mine to ask for." She held his gaze. "What I am asking," he said, and his voice had a quality she had not heard in it before. Not the polished composure of a CEO. Not the careful measured tone of a man who had learned to manage his own exposure. Something rawer and more permanent than both. Is whether the person I became in those 10 years is someone you are willing to choose. Not because of what we were at 16. Because of what we are right now. In this room. With everything between us finally on the table. Like this video right now if your heart is completely in your throat. Because we are at the most important moment in this entire series, and I need you present for every single word of what comes next. Drop a comment. Did you always know they were going to find their way back? Tell me below. The silence that followed was the kind that has texture. Not empty, full, dense, carrying the weight of every conversation they had not had in the years between 16 and now. Every almost moment in this conference room. Every careful professional boundary. Every time she had stepped back when something in her wanted to step forward. She looked at him across the small distance between their chairs and felt the full 11 years of the story they had both been living simultaneously and separately. The prequel and the decade, and all the becoming that the decade had required, arrive in this moment and settle. She thought about Auntie Abena. A life without surprise is a life you have already finished living. She thought about Kofi in his kitchen and the step back she had taken without deciding to, and what her body had been telling her for years that she had been declining to hear. She thought about a Tuesday morning in Johannesburg and a file on a laptop and a name she had read 3 times before she went to stand at her balcony for 22 minutes. She thought about the contract she had accepted, knowing exactly whose name was at the top of it. She thought about this man, at 16 and at 28. The boy who had sat in her shade uninvited, and the man who had covered her with his jacket when she fell asleep at the conference table, and the CEO who had said, "I needed to know I could become someone worth being," in an interview she had read 3 times on day 2 of her preparation. "I took the contract knowing it was you," she said. He waited, completely still, giving her the full space of whatever she needed to say. "I told myself it was because it was good work," she said. "And it is good work, but that is not why I said yes." She held his gaze without flinching. "I said yes because I was 26 years old, and I had spent 10 years building a life around a story that turned out to be missing a piece and something in me. The part that had been sitting at 2 in the morning in Johannesburg asking questions I had been refusing to ask. Understood that the only way to find out if the piece changed anything was to be in the same room as it." He exhaled. One breath. The breath of someone who has been holding something for a very long time. "And does it," he said, "change anything?" She looked at him. At the eyes that had been warm and direct and seeing her clearly since they were teenagers in a school courtyard in a European city that couldn't decide what it was. At the face that had become the face of a man who had done the work of becoming rather than just the work of achieving. At the person sitting in the chair beside her with nothing between them for the first time. No partial truths, no missing chapters, no carefully maintained distance. Just 2 people with the complete story finally available to both of them. "It changes everything," she said, "and it changes nothing. The 10 years happened. We both became who we became in them, and I would not trade who I became for the alternative." She paused. "But yes. It changes what I am willing to do next." "What are you willing to do next?" he said. His voice was very quiet, very present. She looked at him for one more moment, one last held breath of the space before something becomes irrevocable. And then she let the breath go. "I am willing to choose this," she said. "Not the version from 16. That version needed to end the way it ended so that this version could exist. This version. You at 28 and me at 27, with everything we know and everything we have built, and the complete truth finally between us." She held his gaze. "I am willing to choose this with my eyes completely open." He looked at her the way he had been looking at her since October of the year they were both 16, with the full unmanaged version of himself, nothing rationed, nothing held back, and said simply and completely, "Then I am choosing it too." The conference room was very quiet. Outside, Seoul moved at its relentless frequency. The building hummed around them. 30 floors below the city went about its business with its usual indifference to the private revolutions happening above it. And in the glass-walled conference room on the 30th floor of a building that Seo-jun had built from nothing because he needed to become someone worth being, 2 people who had loved each other at 16 and spent 10 years becoming the versions of themselves that could do it properly, chose, not dramatically, not with a kiss in the rain or a speech or any of the performed versions of love that get mistaken for the real thing. Just 2 people, sitting beside each other in the morning light, looking at each other with their eyes completely open, choosing. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was the most significant thing either of them had done in their adult lives, and it happened quietly in a conference room with the city outside and nobody watching. The best things always do. They did not announce anything. They did not need to. What changed was smaller and more significant than an announcement. It was the way he brought her coffee at exactly the right time without asking. It was the way she started sitting at his end of the table rather than the opposite end. It was the way their working sessions ran longer than professional necessity required, and neither of them pretended this was about the work. It was the way the building seemed to understand something had shifted. The way Tae-young stopped appearing in the conference room to check on things and started leaving them to it with the expression of someone who has been waiting for a specific resolution and has just seen it arrive. Tae-young said nothing. He was wise enough to know that some things did not require comment. He increased his team's autonomy by 20% the following week and sent Seo-jun a message that said simply, "The restructuring is ahead of schedule," and smiled at his phone for a reason that had nothing to do with the restructuring. The working sessions continued with the full professional rigor Zara had always brought to them. She had not taken this contract to give it anything less than her complete best, and she was not about to start now. If anything, the sessions were more focused than before. Something about the removal of the managed distance between them had freed up an enormous amount of interior bandwidth that had previously been occupied by maintaining that distance, and the freed bandwidth went directly into the work. Seo-jun noticed this and found it completely characteristic of her and deeply, unreasonably attractive. On Thursday, they were working late, both of them aware that the restructuring was entering its final phase, that the work which had kept them in the same building for 6 weeks was approaching its natural conclusion, and that the conclusion of the contract was a different kind of deadline than the professional one. They were reviewing the final operational framework, the document that represented 6 weeks of work and would define the next 3 years of KSJ Technologies, and she was going through it with a focused precision that had made his entire executive team evangelical about her abilities. She paused at a section on leadership development. "Your people are extraordinary," she said, without looking up from the document, the tone of someone stating a fact they have arrived at through evidence rather than sentiment. He looked at her. "I know. I mean it specifically." She did look up then, at him, the direct version. "The way they talk about what they are building here, the investment they have in it, that does not come from a compensation package. That comes from the person at the top understanding that people build things better when they feel like the thing belongs to them." She paused. "You gave them that. You built something worth belonging to." He held her gaze. "That's the second time you've told me I built something good." She remembered. The window moment weeks ago. You built something real. It had come out before her editing mechanism caught it, and she had felt exposed and redirected immediately. "The first time I wasn't ready to mean it fully," she said. "I mean it fully now." He was quiet for a moment. Something in his expression that was not quite the professional composure and not quite the open, unguarded version from the morning 2 days ago. Something between them. Something new. The specific expression of someone who is still getting used to being seen clearly by someone they love, and finding it the most disorienting and the most steady thing simultaneously. "Can I tell you something?" he said. "Yes." "The day I found out you were taking this contract, when my assistant sent me the consultant profile, I sat at my desk for 4 minutes and did not move. My assistant came in twice to ask if I was all right." She looked at him. 4 minutes. 4 minutes and 17 seconds. I counted. She felt something warm move through her chest. "Why did you count?" "Because counting is the thing I do when something is too significant to just sit in," he said. "When I need something to belong to me while everything else is happening." She stared at him. Because that was what she did. The counting. The specific private practice of giving yourself something concrete to hold while the enormous thing moved through you. She had never told anyone about the counting. Not Amara, not Auntie Abina, nobody. It had been hers. Private. the small ritual of someone who felt things so fully that they needed a container for the feeling. And he did it too. Had apparently always done it. "I count too," she said quietly. "I have counted since I was 16. I counted 45 minutes the night of the formal. I counted 22 minutes at a balcony railing in Johannesburg the morning I found your name in a file." He looked at her with the complete full version of himself and said nothing for a long moment. Then, 22 minutes, he said. 22, she confirmed. He reached across the document between them, and his hand found hers on the table. She looked down at their hands, then up at him. She did not step back. She turned her hand over and her fingers closed around his, and the document with 6 weeks of work on it sat between them, and neither of them looked at it for a long time. The contract ended on a Friday. 6 weeks of restructuring work delivered in a final presentation to the full KSJ Technologies executive team. A 2-hour session that Zara ran with the complete commanding authority that had characterized every moment of her professional engagement with this building, this company, these people. The operational framework, the revenue model, the staffing restructure built around the people rather than despite them. The 3-year implementation roadmap presented with the specific clarity of someone who understood not just what needed to change, but why the change mattered and who would carry it. The room was completely silent when she finished. Then Tae-young started clapping. Not the polite applause of a professional obligation, but the genuine kind. The specific response of someone who has spent 6 weeks watching someone exceptional do exceptional work, and has arrived at the end of it with the particular satisfaction of having been in the room when something important happened. The rest of the team followed. The CFO, the product lead, the heads of 3 departments who had started these sessions skeptical and were ending them converted. Seo-jun sat at the end of the table and did not clap immediately. He looked at her, the full unmanaged version, the one he had stopped rationing 2 days ago, with an expression that his team would later discuss in various configurations and conclude was the most unguarded they had ever seen their CEO look in a professional setting. Zara looked back at him across the length of the table. She allowed herself 1 full unmanaged second of it. Then she thanked the room and began collecting her documents, and the meeting dissolved into the particular energy of people who have been given both a direction and the confidence that the direction is correct. Tae-young appeared at her elbow as the room emptied. He was holding 2 cups of coffee, the good kind, from the place 3 blocks away that she had been getting her own from every morning since week 1. "From the kitchen this time," he said, "since it's the last day and I figured you might allow it." She looked at the coffee, then at him. "How did you know which one?" "I asked Seo-jun," he said simply, "about 3 weeks ago." He handed it to her with the expression of someone who has just admitted something they were not entirely planning to admit and has decided to lean into it. "We are going to miss you, Ms. Mensah. This company is better for what you did here." She received this, not deflecting it, not minimizing it, not redirecting it to the work rather than the person the way she usually received professional praise. She looked at Tae-young, this man who had been skeptical in that first meeting and had become quietly, genuinely invested in the work and in her over 6 weeks, and said, "Thank you. This company deserves someone who actually cared about the people in it. You all made that easy." He nodded once, the nod of someone satisfied. Then he took his coffee and left. She stood in the conference room alone for a moment. The room that had been her professional home for 6 weeks. The table where she had sat across from Seo-jun every day and managed the distance and then stopped managing it. The window with the Seoul skyline that she had stood at more than once with her arms crossed, feeling things she wasn't ready to name. She pressed her hand flat against the conference table. Then she picked up her portfolio and walked out. Subscribe right now if you have been here for this entire series, because what is about to happen in the next few minutes is everything this story has been building toward, and I need every single one of you present for it. Like this video if the bet series has lived in your chest since the prequel. We are almost at the end and it is worth every single second. He found her in the corridor putting on her coat. Not the conference room, not his office. The corridor outside the elevator, the unremarkable in-between space of a building that had hosted 6 weeks of something remarkable. She was buttoning her coat with the practiced efficiency of someone who had been putting on coats in professional corridors for 7 years and did not require assistance or ceremony. She looked up when she heard him. He was still in his suit jacket, no coat, having clearly come directly from wherever he had been the moment the meeting ended. He stopped a few feet from her. The corridor was empty. Everyone else had dispersed into the post-meeting energy of a team with a new direction and the momentum to pursue it. Just the two of them. And the elevator at the end of the corridor. And 6 weeks of everything. "Walk with me," he said. Not a question, not a professional request. The simple, direct statement of someone who has decided that the distance between a building and wherever they are going is better covered with a specific person beside them. She looked at him for a moment. Then she finished buttoning her coat. "Okay," she said. They took the elevator down in a silence that was not awkward. The specific, comfortable silence of two people who had spent enough time together to understand that silence between them was not absence, but presence. The lobby, the glass doors. Seoul in the early evening doing its Friday version of itself. Slightly more relaxed than the weekday pace, the city's equivalent of loosening a collar. They walked. No destination discussed, no direction agreed upon. They simply walked beside each other through the Seoul evening with the city moving around them and the particular ease of two people who have stopped needing a reason to be in the same place. She spoke first. "I'm going to miss this city," she said. He looked at her. "When do you leave?" 2 weeks. There are some final handover sessions with your team and then the engagement closes." She paused. "My firm has already sent me the next contract." "Where?" "Nairobi." She looked at the street ahead. "It's good work." He was quiet for a moment. They walked past a small market stall, past a cafe with its windows fogged from the warmth inside, past two people on a bench sharing something from a paper bag, with the comfortable intimacy of people who had been sharing things for a long time. 2 weeks, he said. 2 weeks, she confirmed. He stopped walking. She walked 2 steps further before she realized and turned back. He was standing on the pavement looking at her with an expression she recognized. Not the managed version, not the professional version, the one that had been there since he was a boy who had crossed a courtyard because something in him recognized, something in her. "I need to say something," he said. "Say it," she said. Not the professional tone, the other one. The one that had been developing over 6 weeks and 2 days of choosing and had no protective distance built into it. "I am not going to ask you to change your plans," he said. "The Nairobi contract is good work, and you are the best person for it, and I would not ask you to be anything less than exactly who you are, for any reason including this." He held her gaze. "But I need you to know, before you go, with the full clarity of someone who has spent 10 years figuring out how to say things completely, rather than partially, that I am in this. Whatever this looks like with 2 weeks and then Nairobi and whatever comes after Nairobi, I am in it completely. Not as a feeling I am managing, as a decision I have made." The Seoul evening moved around them. A bus passed. Someone's phone rang briefly and was answered. The city went about its business with a magnificent indifference it reserved for everything that was not its own. Zara looked at him on that pavement in the early evening light and felt 11 years of the story arrive in her chest simultaneously. Not heavy, not painful, just present. Just the full weight of everything that had happened and everything it had made, and the person standing in front of her who had been built from the same years she had. "Seo-jun," she said. "Yes." "I counted 45 minutes the night of the formal," she said. "In a dormitory room in a green dress. And every time after that, when something cost me more than I was ready for. Kofi, the night in Johannesburg. The morning I found your name in the file. Always 45 minutes, always the same." She paused. "I realized something recently." "What?" he said. "Every time I was counting, every single time, It was because of something that led here. Every 45 minutes was a chapter in the story that brought me to this pavement. She held his gaze. I am done counting. I am done giving myself 45 minutes to feel something and then closing the door on it. I am choosing to leave the door open. I am choosing you, and I am choosing Nairobi, and I am choosing whatever comes after, and I am doing it with my eyes completely open and no door closed behind me. He crossed the 2 steps between them. Not rushing. Not the desperate urgency of someone afraid the moment will end before they reach it. The deliberate, certain movement of someone who has waited 11 years and has learned, in those years, the specific value of arriving at things properly. He took her face in his hands the way he had taken nothing since he was 16 years old, and something about the gentleness of it. The complete absence of performance, just a man holding the face of the person he loved with the full awareness of what he was holding, made her close her eyes for a single second before she opened them again. She needed to see him. She had learned, the hard way, the long way, that closing your eyes at the moments that matter was a form of the same old protection, and she was done with the protection. She looked at him. He looked at her. And he kissed her. Not the balcony kiss. That kiss had been soft and exact and real, but it had also been 16 and incomplete, and had a word dropped into the middle of it before it could become what it was supposed to be. This was different. This was the kiss at the end of a story, rather than the beginning of one, the kind that arrives after everything has been said and accounted for and chose, and there is nothing left between 2 people except the simple, true fact of what they are to each other. It was warm. It was complete. It was the most unhurried thing either of them had done in adult memory. When it ended, she did not step back. She looked at him. He looked at her. The Seoul evening wrapped around them with its usual magnificent indifference, and they stood on a pavement in the middle of it and let themselves be exactly where they were. You should have just walked to the tree, she said. He laughed. Actually laughed. The genuine version, the one that came from somewhere completely unmanaged. I know, he said. I would have talked to you, she said. You would not have needed the dare. I know that too, he said. Now. She looked at him for a moment. Then she took his hand. He looked down at their joined hands with an expression she had never seen on him before. Something so simply happy that it had no sophistication in it at all. Nothing earned or built or performed. Just the clean, uncomplicated happiness of someone holding something they thought they had lost, and understanding it was never actually gone. They walked. 3 days later, Zara called Amara at a reasonable hour for once. Mid-afternoon Lagos time. Amara in the middle of something she immediately abandoned when she saw the name on her screen. Tell me, Amara said. He kissed me on a pavement in Seoul, Zara said. The sound Amara made could probably be heard in the adjacent apartment, possibly the adjacent building. Zara held the phone away from her ear and smiled at the ceiling of her Seoul apartment with the expression of someone who has finally allowed themselves to be completely, simply, uncomplicated happy about something. On a pavement, Amara said when she had sufficiently recovered. Not even a romantic location, just a pavement. Just a pavement, Zara confirmed. That is the most you thing that has ever happened, Amara said. Zara Mensah's great love story ends, or begins, on a pavement in Seoul. Begins, Zara said, quietly, with complete certainty. Amara was quiet for a moment. Then she said, in the voice she reserved for the true things, How do you feel? Zara thought about it, not to construct an answer, just to arrive at the honest one, the way she had been practicing arriving at honest answers ever since a Sunday morning in Johannesburg when she had finally stopped managing and started feeling. Like myself, she said, like the full version of myself, like the part of me that closed a door at 16 and spent 10 years calling the closed door strength has finally, she paused, finding the exact right word, opened. Amara said nothing for a moment. Then, your aunt is going to say I told you so. My aunt has been saying I told you so for 10 years without using those words, Zara said. She will use them now. They both laughed. Drop a comment right now telling me which moment in this entire series broke you the most. The balcony? The 45 minutes? The counting? The pavement? I need to know. And if the Bet series has meant something to you, please share it with someone today. Someone who needs a love story that feels completely real. Daniel received a message from Zara 4 days after the pavement. 4 words. I heard you. Thank you. He sat with those 4 words for a long time. Then he replied with 2. I'm sorry. She replied with 1. I know. The conversation ended there. Clean, complete, without warmth exactly. That would take longer, might never be fully what it once was, and he did not expect it to be. But with the particular closure of something that had been open for 11 years finally, quietly, closing. Not a door slamming. A door being gently and permanently shut by someone who had decided what belonged inside and what did not. He put his phone down, looked at his office, at the Seoul skyline through his window, at the life he had built in this city from the investment of a guilt he was finally done using as fuel. He needed new fuel now, the cleaner kind. The kind that came from building something because it was worth building rather than because you were trying to prove something to a conscience that would never be fully settled. He called his assistant, told her to clear his afternoon. He had some thinking to do. Seo-jun texted Jinwoo that evening. 2 sentences. She knows. It's real this time. Jinwoo replied in 30 seconds. About time. Buy her breakfast. He stared at the message. Then he laughed. Quietly to himself, in the empty apartment that had been his for 5 years and had never felt particularly temporary until this week when it had started feeling like a chapter rather than a destination. He typed back, working on it. Then he put his phone down and sat in the particular quiet of someone who has arrived somewhere after a very long journey and is taking a moment before the next thing to simply be in the arrival. He thought about 17, about the tree in the courtyard, and the afternoon light. About a girl who had told him to come back when he knew what he wanted, and the specific experience of discovering, in the weeks that followed, that what he wanted was to keep coming back. That what he wanted was her. He had known it at 17. He had not been able to give it the full dignity it deserved at 17. He had spent 10 years learning how. The learning was done now. 2 weeks later, on the last day of the contract, Zara handed Seo-jun the final delivery document across his desk, not across a conference room table, in his actual office, the room she had walked past for 6 weeks and finally walked into for the last professional purpose. And he took it with both hands the way you take something you intend to keep. It's good work, he said. It's good work, she agreed. He looked at the document, then at her. Nairobi. 3 weeks, she said. The engagement starts in 3 weeks. I'll call you, he said. You'll call me, she confirmed. She picked up her portfolio, moved to the door, stopped. She turned back. He was already looking at her. He had been looking at her. He would probably always be looking at her in some form regardless of the distance between them because that was the specific and irreversible thing she did to a room. Made it impossible to look anywhere else. Seo-jun, she said. Yes. When I come back from Nairobi, she paused, holding his gaze. I am coming back to Seoul. He was very still. Not for a contract, she said. For you. I am telling you this now, so you know, and so I know, and so neither of us spends the time I am away wondering whether this is something we are both in completely. He stood up from his desk, crossed the office, stopped in front of her with the 2 feet of distance that was all that remained between them after everything. I have been completely in this, he said, since you walked through my conference room door 6 weeks ago. I have been completely in this since October of the year we were both 16. I have been completely in this in every version of completely that a person is capable of being in. He looked at her with the full, unmanaged version of himself. Nothing held back, nothing managed. Just Kim Seo-jun at 28 standing in front of the person he had loved since he was a boy and saying the true thing simply and completely. Go to Nairobi. Do excellent work. Come back to Seoul. Come back to me. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she leaned forward and kissed him once. Brief, certain, the period at the end of a sentence rather than an opening. And stepped back and walked out of his office with the portfolio under her arm and her coat on, and the particular composure of someone who is extremely happy and is allowing themselves to simply be extremely happy, without managing it into something more containable. The elevator opened. She stepped in, looked back down the corridor at him standing in his office doorway, watching her go. She did not look through him this time. She smiled. The doors closed. 3 months later, on a quiet Sunday morning in Seoul, the city outside Zara's apartment was doing its usual unhurried weekend version of itself, softer than the weekday pace. The version of Seoul that had decided to exist at a human frequency for one day of the week. She was reading at the kitchen table, an actual book, the kind she had read under a tree at 16 before she became someone who read almost exclusively for professional purpose, with the pen moving constantly and the margins full of arguments with the text. Her coffee was beside her hand. The morning light came through the east-facing window at a useful angle. Seo-jun was at the counter making breakfast. He had arrived the night before from a work trip, and she had opened the door, and he had stood in the doorway with his jacket over his arm, and the specific expression of someone who has been traveling toward a specific person and has just arrived, and she had stepped back to let him in, and it had been the simplest and most complete thing. He was talking now. Something about a film he had watched on the plane, describing it in a way that suggested genuine enthusiasm about one specific scene and mild outrage about the ending. And she was hearing approximately half of it, because the other half of her attention was occupied by something she was not quite ready to say out loud yet, but could feel settling into her with the permanence of something that was not going anywhere. He set a plate beside her, sat across from her, opened his own book. They read. The apartment was quiet. Their breathing, the occasional turn of a page, the city outside doing its Sunday thing. Between them, the particular ease of two people who had done the hard work, not just of finding each other, but of becoming people who could receive each other, resting with the weight of something that had taken 11 years to arrive and was in no hurry now that it had. She looked up from her page. He was already looking at her. Not the rationed professional version, the full one. The one that had existed since he was 16 years old and had never fully gone anywhere in the 11 years since. She held his gaze, let it be real, did not step back from it. Then she went back to her book. His hand found hers on the table without either of them deciding it. Her fingers closed around his without either of them commenting on it. They read. The Sunday light moved across the table between them as the morning deepened. Outside, the city continued being a city, relentless and indifferent and beautiful in the specific way of places that have witnessed too many human stories to be impressed by any of them and go on anyway. Inside this apartment, on this morning, in this particular light, two people who had loved each other at 16 and spent 11 years becoming the versions of themselves that could do it properly, did it properly. Not perfectly, not without the weight of the years between, but completely. With everything on the table and nothing missing, and both of them present in the full, unmanaged sense. Not performing happiness, not curating it, just living in it the way you live in something you have earned through the specific costly work of becoming. He had spent 10 years becoming someone worthy of her. She had spent 10 years becoming someone who finally believed she deserved to be chosen. They had arrived at this Sunday morning from completely different directions by completely different roads, through London and Seoul and Johannesburg and Nairobi and every other city and decision and 45-minute countdown and 22-minute balcony railing and all the becoming that the years between had required. And sitting here now in the quiet of a Sunday morning with coffee and books, and a hand finding another hand on a table without either person deciding to reach. They were both, in every way that mattered, exactly on time.